also another GIF of two types of tremor, the intentional and postural. As you can see here in intentional tremor, the patient is trying to reach the apple. There is a purposeful movement and the tremor occurs. Meanwhile, the other one, the patient is trying to maintain the posture, and maintaining the posture gives the other terms or definitions are chorea. For the chorea, as you can see in the left lower GIF or GIF, is is described as an irregular and predictable involuntary muscle jerks. And because of this involuntary muscle jerks, this impairs the movement of the patient. For the balismus, it is described as the affectation of the proximal limb, and this causes the abnormal violent movements. And for the atetosis, as you can see in the right lower GIF, there is a slow breathing movement. If I'm not wrong or if I'm not mistaken, you can commonly see this atetosis in patients suffering with cerebral palsy. So for the dystonia, it is defined as sustained and repetitive muscle twitching, spasm, or cramp. As you can see in the left lower GIF, the patient is suffering intense spastic contraction of the muscles, and it is uncontrollable or it's also involuntary. For the tics, this is described as coordinated abnormal movements that occurs repetitively. It especially occurs in the head and the face. And the common tics are the sniffing and shoulder shrugging. So before we go to the pathology of the Parkinsonism, we must first discuss the basic anatomy and physiology of the basal ganglia. So as we all know, or we are all familiar with the basal ganglia, the main structures found in the basal ganglia are the caudate, the globus, the putamen, the subthalamic nucleus, the substantia nigra, and some other nuclei. The caudate nucleus plus the putamen comprises the striatum, which is main receiver or main it receives input from the cortex. For the normal circuitry of the basal ganglia, the next slide I will explain the normal circuitry of the basal ganglia. So for the function of the basal ganglia, it modulates the information or the input from the cerebral cortex, the motor neurons of the spinal cord, and the neostriatum. This is the principal input structure of the basal ganglia and receive the excitatory glutamatergic input from the cortex. So this is the normal circuitry of the basal ganglia. It involves three important organ or structure: the cortex, the basal ganglia, and the thalamus. As you can see here, as was previously described, the cortex provides an input to the striatum and uses glutamate as the neurotransmitter. Remember, in this striatum comprises or composed of putamen and caudate. And in here, in this area of the basal ganglia, this is where predominantly the receptors of dopamine are commonly found, especially the D1 and D2 receptors. And these different receptors gives rise to the different pathways, the indirect and the direct pathway. We have two pathways that are well described in this normal circuitry of the basal ganglia. So for the for this pathway to occur or to what do you call this to happen or to happen, we have this another structure of the basal ganglia, the substantia nigra pars compacta, that uses dopamine neurotransmitter, and depending onto the receptor in this striatum, it will produce the direct or indirect pathway. Commonly, for the direct pathway, it uses the receptor D1 and 5 receptor. For the indirect pathway, it uses D2 D2 type receptors of the D2 3 4 receptors. So for the direct pathway, as you can as the name it implies, it is a direct pathway. The projection of the striatum to the output structure of the basal ganglia, which are the globus pallidus and the substantia nigra pars reticulata. This it is called direct pathway because, as you can see, it bypasses the different structures of the basal ganglia, like the globus pallidus and the subthalamic nucleus. And this direct pathway modulate a projected to the output structures will projected to the output structures of the basal ganglia will will produce an excitatory output of the excitatory projection output of the thalamus to the cortex. And for the indirect pathway, as you can see, it is called indirect pathway because it will have to go through different structures of the basal ganglia, the globus pallidus, subthalamic nucleus, and then goes to the output structure of the basal ganglia. Remember that the indirect pathway, it has glutamate, it uses glutamate neurotransmitter, and the net net effect of this pathway is it produces an inhibitory output projection to the cortex. Remember, this pathway, an imbalance of this pathway caused by the depletion or loss of the neurons in the substantia nigra will produce the effect or the manifestation that are commonly seen in the pathology of the Parkinsonism, which I will be discussing for today. So for the common manifestation or symptoms of patient with Parkinsonism, we have the mnemonic drops, tremors, rigidity, and akinesia, and postural instability. So Parkinsonism is described as incurable progressive that increases disability with time. So in here, this is the pathogenesis of the Parkinsonism. In Goodman and Gilman, they specifically named Parkinsonism as idiopathic Parkinson disease, and it is the most common form of the Parkinson disease, and it's described by James Parkinson. And it is also called paralysis agitans or shaking palsy. So the cause of this pathology the cause of the pathology of this Parkinson disease was because of the loss of the dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra pars compacta. This is due to the accumulation of the intracellular inclusion bodies that is called as Lewy bodies, which compose of an aggregates of a protein called alpha-synuclein. So 80% loss of this neuron will cause symptomatic effect like the motor effect that was previously stated, the drop, the tremor, rigidity, akinesia, and postural instability. So for the most common causes of death of this patient is due to immobility and aspiration pneumonia and pulmonary embolism. In Goodman and Gilman, it also stated that there are such thing as non-motor Parkinson disease, which is an outside pathology of the dopamine system. As the name implies, it is a non-motor. If the signs and symptoms are non-motor, there are anosmia, REM behavior disorder that is marked by agitation during sleep, autonomic nervous system that disturbances that causes especially constipation. So we have here the drugs that causes a Parkinsonism like manifestation. Of course, as we all know that the in Parkinson's disease, there is depletion of the neurons that produces dopamine. So dopamine receptor antagonists, this will mimic the pathology of Parkinsonism. For antipsychotics, haloperidol and chlorpromazine, this also it also somehow, I think, decreases the dopamine, because in psychotic individuals, so of the neurotransmitter, especially the dopamine. And for the antiemetics, rinig pa ba ako?
Yes, you are heard. You can continue.
So for the antiemetics, there is also a dopaminergic receptor antagonist action that is found in these drugs, like prochlorperazine and metoclopramide. So this is pathogenesis from Katzung. And in Katzung, it says that the pathology of this Parkinsonism is due to the combinations of the following: impaired degradation of protein, intracellular protein accumulation aggregation, oxidative stress, mitochondrial damage, inflammatory cascade, and apoptosis, leading to loss of neurons in the substantia nigra pars compacta. So for the cases of this disease, this Parkinsonism, it is 10 to 15% is caused by genetics, and the causes of this Parkinsonism is due to the mutation, as was shown earlier in our neurology. The mutations in the alpha-synuclein gene, the LRRK2, UCHL1, and the Parkin gene. In the mutation of the alpha-synuclein gene, there is accumulation of the alpha-synuclein protein, leading to the accumulation of this Lewy body into different parts of the cortex. And for the LRRK and UCHL, it causes autosomal dominant Parkinsonism, and Parkin gene causes autosomal recessive Parkinsonism. So in here we have staging that is used in staging the clinical manifestation of patient with Parkinson's disease. We call this, it is called BRAC staging. So in stage 1, it commonly affects, there is a accumulation of the Lewy body, or of the Lewy body in the olfactory and the autonomic, and the lower portion of the midbrain, I think. Yes, lower portion of the midbrain, causing olfactory loss and autonomic dysfunction. For the stage 2, there's an accumulation of the Lewy body in the higher brainstem in here, and causing affective impairment, anxiety, and sleep disturbance. Stage 3, this is the important stage in where the clinical manifestation of motor symptoms that drop, where you can see the tremors, rigidity, akinesia, and postural instability, because the accumulation of the Lewy body is already at the level of the basal ganglia, especially at the substantia nigra. For stage 4 and stage 5, this is the accumulation is already all over the cortex, causing worsening of the symptoms of patient with Parkinson's disease. In the lower figure, you can see that the Lewy bodies, where they are distributed or located. So in here, this is a simple figure that that explains the pathogenesis of Parkinsonism. This is due to the depletion of the dopamine that causes the imbalance between the direct and indirect pathway, leading to movement disorder. So before we go to the medications or the treatment or management of the Parkinsonism, we have to explain first the dopamine synthesis and the metabolism. So as you can see in here, the amino acids tyrosine and phenylalanine, with the help of the catalyzed by the enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase and tyrosine hydroxylase, will give rise to the L-DOPA or the levodihydroxyphenylalanine. Remember that the levodopa is the only substrate or the only only substrate ba? Yes, of this pathway that can cross the blood-brain barrier. That's why levodopa drugs or levodopa form is the one given to patient with Parkinsonism. And through the help of the of the enzyme dopa decarboxylase, will have now the dopamine. In here, you can also see the tyramine, the amino acid ba? This tyramine that through the help of this liver enzyme cytochrome P2D6, this tyramine can be converted also to dopamine. This is the reason why have to you have to decrease or you have to decrease or avoid food that contains tyramine because the like for the Maui or other substances that inhibit the metabolism of this dopamine because the action of the inhibitor like Maui is a positive positive or it is a positive because it will not metabolize the dopamine and the and if there's an available tyramine in the body and it will be converted again to dopamine, it will have more it will enhance the level of the dopamine thereby increasing the levels or the serum levels of dopamine, causing uh different problems like hypertension or the patient will have hypertensive crisis.
So again, as a review, what are your sources of your tyramine?
For the sources of the thiamine that we have wine, aged cheese, beef, ah, wait lang, let me search.
So basically, those fermented ones in
Yes.
general. So you have your cheeses, you have your cured meats, okay? And to make it simpler, your discussion about the MAO inhibitors is that basically it prevents the degradation. So when there is prevention of degradation, then definitely the concentration of that substance will increase and that will also give you some forms
Wala
of
talaga net ko.
manifestations clinically. Okay? Sige, you can continue.
Wala yung net ko.
Yeah, you can proceed.
So for the metabolism of the dopamine, we have the MAUI and the COMT as the enzyme that metabolize or degrade this neurotransmitter and giving rise to the end product HBA, which is the homovanillic acid and dopac also. So this one will be further the MAUI and the COMT will be further discussed later because different drugs is different drugs is found that inhibits the metabolism of the dopamine. For the dopamine receptors, we have that is also important to be discussed. We have 5 types of dopamine, but they are grouped into two family, the D1 and the D2, like dopamine receptors. So for the D1 receptor, it is coupled both. I mean, all dopamine receptors are G-coupled protein, and for the D1 like receptors, they are G-coupled protein subscript S. Because the action of the D1 receptor is more of stimulatory, and for the D2 type receptors, they are coupled with subscript I, which is an inhibitory in action. And for where you can find the receptors, they are tabulated here. But commonly, these receptors are found especially in the substantia nigra, where the pathology of the Parkinsonism happens. So we now go to the for the drug or management and treatment of patient with Parkinsonism. So in here we have the pharmacokinetics of levodopa. So for the absorption of levodopa, it is rapidly absorbed in small intestines, but this depends on the gastric emptying and pH. And because certain amino acids compete for the distribution, the plasma concentration can peak within 1 to 2 hours after oral administration of this drug. Remember that food ingestion delays the concentration or the appearance of the levodopa on plasma. And for the metabolism, the half-life is 1 to 3 hours. And for the elimination, two-thirds of the metabolite is secreted or excreted in the urine as the homovanillic acid and dopa. We have this enzyme, the dopa decarboxylase, that is found peripherally that that will that will convert the levodopa into dopamine, thereby it will prevent the drug entering the blood-brain barrier. Because remember, dopamine cannot enter the blood-brain barrier. So in here we have the comparison of drug levodopa that is used alone and levodopa used with carbidopa. So in here, as you can see, for the levodopa dose, the amount that is used compared to the levodopa dose with carbidopa is much marami, or it's much more than the levodopa with carbidopa. So orally, it is given and absorbed in small intestine, and two-thirds, as previously mentioned, two-thirds of the metabolite of the levodopa is secreted via urine. And for the one-third that is left, remember that only one-third of the concentration of the levodopa that is administered can cross or can enter the brain, because the enzyme dopa decarboxylase will metabolize the levodopa that was administered, and 27 to 29% is converted to dopamine. For the levodopa that is given with carbidopa, as you can see in here, there is lesser dose that is given. And again, the absorption especially occurs in the small intestine, and only 40% of the only 40% of the metabolite is secreted in the GI tract, and 60% compared to the 30% that is used if it is only used with levodopa lang. Diba? There is much more available plasma concentration. This is because of the use of the carbidopa. And as you can see also here, compared also to the levodopa use alone, in the levodopa dose lang, there's only 1 to 3% that is absorbed or is able permitted to enter the brain, because the peripheral enzyme, the dopa decarboxylase, that inhibits or that converts this levodopa to dopamine, thereby allowing a small amount only to enter the brain. Because the action of the carbidopa is to inhibit this dopa decarboxylase that is found peripherally, and thereby inhibiting the conversion of the levodopa to dopamine, thereby increasing the amount of level or percentage that is able to cross the brain, thereby much more effective in treating patient with Parkinson's disease.
Yeah. That's why your levodopa with carbidopa would be the first line of treatment for your patients that have or patients with comorbidities. Okay? So if you have patients like they have heart problems, they have other diseases, then your levodopa and carbidopa would be the best drug for your Parkinsonism. And that is because of the presence of your carbidopa, which can be your decarboxylase inhibitor. Okay, sige, continue.
So this is for the carbidopa. It inhibits the peripheral dopa decarboxylase, and the starting dose is this 100 milligram is for the levodopa, and this for 25 milligram is for the carbidopa. This is taken thrice a day, and it is taken 30 to 60 minutes before meals because meal will compete with the absorption of this drug. And adjunct with dopamine agonist can reduce the risk of response fluctuation. So another drug we have is Parcopa. It is a formulation that it's a formulation of carbidopa and levodopa combined na into one drug only. And it's also best taken 1 hour prior to meals. So we have drug holidays in Parkinsonism. But these drug holidays are not really recommended because the benefits outweighs the benefits outweighs the risk. As you can see, the complication of this drug holidays is much more detrimental to patient than giving only a temporary improve in responsiveness to levodopa. That's why these drug holidays are not recommended in patient with Parkinsonism. For the drug interaction, we have two. The vitamin B6 in the MAWIs. As I said earlier, levodopa, MAWI is a positive, or it increases, or it will prevent the metabolism of the dopamine. Thereby, if you give levodopa, thereby increasing the dopamine concentration, and then if you give again MAWI, that prevents the breakdown of the dopamine, thereby enhancing the level or increasing the levels of the dopamine, leading to hypertensive crisis. It is important to discontinue the MAWI 2 weeks before giving levodopa. And for the vitamin B6, um, it is found that vitamin B6 enhance the extracerebral metabolism of levodopa, thereby preventing the therapeutic effect of levodopa. So we have the peripheral decarboxylase inhibitor that can be given to counteract B6. So peripheral decarboxylase inhibitor example is the carbidopa. For contraindications, again, psychotic patients, because of the in psychotic patients they have imbalance also in the neurotransmitter. This will just aggravate the condition of patient. And also for angle closure glaucoma, chronic open angle glaucoma, and for the patient is at risk for if the patient is at risk for melanoma, because dopamine is, I think, a precursor of melanin, and giving patient with risk of melanoma can increase more the risk of patient to have this malignant skin cancer. So for the adverse effect, it will be discussed by my other group mate.
Okay, you continue and then I will ask question.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to discuss about some adverse effects of Parkinsonism. Next slide. First is gastrointestinal effect. If levodopa is given without peripheral decarboxylase inhibitor, anorexia and nausea and vomiting, we can see about 80% of patients. Antacids taken 30 to 60 minutes before levodopa, and levodopa may also be beneficial. Antiemetics such as phenothiazines avoided because reduce anti-Parkinsonism effects of levodopa and may exacerbate disease. So levodopa, if given in combination with carbidopa, then gastrointestinal effects are much less frequent and less than 20% tolerate high dose. Next slide. Cardiovascular effect. Cardiac arrhythmias like tachycardia, ventricular extrasystoles, rarely atrial fibrillation, effect attributed to increased catecholamine formation peripherally. Levodopa in combination with decarboxylase inhibitor, uh, low incidence of arrhythmias. Like we can see low incidence of arrhythmias. Postural hypotension is common and asymptomatic. It diminishes with continuing treatment. Hypertension, presence of non-selective monoamine oxidase inhibitors or sympathomimetics or levodopa was given. Next slide. Behavioral effects. Mental effects like depression, anxiety, agitation, insomnia, somnolence, confusion, delusions, hallucinations, nightmares, euphoria, and other changes in mood or personality. If levodopa is given in combination with decarboxylase inhibitor, rather than levodopa alone, like it's more common because of high levels reaches to brain. Precipitated intercurrent illness or operation. It may be necessary to withdraw or reduce medication. Atypical antipsychotic agents will have low affinity or dopamine D2 receptors. Dopamine D2 receptors like clozapine, olanzapine, quetiapine, risperidone, available and helpful in counteracting such behavioral complications. Next slide. Miscellaneous adverse effects. Mydriasis may occur and precipitate attack of acute glaucoma in some patients. Rare adverse effects is blood dyscrasias, positive COMS test in hemolysis, hot flushes, aggravation of gout, abnormalities of smell or taste, brownish discoloration of saliva, urine or vaginal secretions, priapism, mild, usually transient elevation of BUN, blood urea nitrogen, serum transaminases, and alkaline phosphatase and bilirubin. Next slide. Dyskinesias and response fluctuations. So in dyskinesias, up to 80% of patients receive levodopa therapy more than 10 years. The character of dopa dyskinesias varies between patients but remain constant in individual patient. Chorioathetosis in face and distal extremities It is common presentation. Development depend on dose related. Fluctuations in clinical response occur with increasing frequency as treatment continues. Timing of levodopa intake, varying of reactions, and of dose echinacea, unrelated to timing of doses on-off phenomena. Next slide. Relate to unequal distribution of striatal dopamine. Dopaminergic denervation plus chronic pulsatile stimulation of dopamine receptors with levodopa gives development of dyskinesias. Lower incidence, levodopa given continuously intradurenally and intrajejunally, drug delivery system enable more continuous delivery of dopaminergic medication. Thank you.
Okay, before we proceed, for those two reporters, what do you call that? What do you call that event wherein if a patient takes your levodopa during the treatment of Parkinson's disease, wherein the patient is basically well, cannot, because you have already addressed the symptoms of your Parkinson's disease. What do you call that? Because as you know, the effect
Sorry,
of your
Doc.
levodopa
Unstable po kasi yung
wanes.
internet. Pwede pong paulit, Doc, yung question.
Okay. Because as you know, the effect of your levodopa wanes when you give it to your Parkinson's disease patients. Now, there is this term that they use in patients who responds well with the intake of levodopa in the early years of medication. What do you call that? There is a specific term for that. Yes, it is the on phenomenon, but what is the other term? The patient is well, tolerates your levodopa, but as the levodopa wears off, then the symptoms recur. So what happened? What do you call that? There is a special term for that. Any idea? Anyone? Sige. Later, pa-search muna ano yung sagot doon. The next question is, what is the besides the advantage of giving your carbidopa with your levodopa, what side effect are you lessening with its combination? So I guess you have read that. The combination of levodopa and carbidopa usually lessens what side effect? And this is a common question in the exam. Anyone?
Gastrointestinal effects.
Is specifically what? You're correct. GI symptoms. But what specific symptoms are we talking about here? Anyone? It is nausea and vomiting, correct? Okay, so sige, you can continue with the report for now, but please answer the question I have asked you a while ago. So what do you call that period wherein the patient takes your levodopa or your Parkinson's drug and then it seems like everything is going well, all symptoms addressed, but after that period, the drug is not working anymore because it's already wearing? What do you call that? Sige, you continue with the report for now.
So good afternoon, everyone. In terms of motor symptoms, there are three families of drugs which are commonly used. These are the L-DOPA, the MAO inhibitors, particularly the MAO-B, and the dopamine agonists. And all of these drugs have a common goal, which is to restore the equilibrium of dopamine in those regions of the brain where the balance is compromised due to the dopaminergic cell loss. So next. So dopamine agonists are chemical compounds that bind to dopamine receptors in the absence of the neurotransmitter dopamine. So these dopamine receptors are abundantly expressed in many tissues in the body, predominantly in the brain. And there are two families of dopamine receptors. They are the D1 family and the D2 family. So the D1-like family consists of the D1 and D5, and they all belong to the and they are GS coupled, while the D2-like family includes the D2, D3, and D4, and they are GI coupled. Next. Next, please. So these are the subclasses of dopamine and their respective function. So D1, 2, 3 are for the locomotor activity, while the D1 and D2 are responsible for the learning and memory mechanisms. Next, please. So the dopaminergic signaling is implicated in the cognition, memory, pleasure, reward, addiction, pain, fine motor control, modulation, and neuroendocrine pathways and learning. And these are achieved through the following dopaminergic pathways. Next, please. So dopamine receptor agonists do not require enzymatic conversion to an active metabolite. They act directly and they do not produce toxic metabolites, and they do not compete with other substances for active transport into the blood, unlike the levodopa. So next po. So dopamine agonists are commonly divided into two groups. These are the ergoline and the non-ergoline derived agonists. Ergoline agonists are the first generation of the DA. They are derived from the ergot. They tend to produce more side effects in a clinical practice due to their interaction with receptors other than the D2 family. The common drugs in ergoline classes are the bromocriptine, cabergoline, pergolide, and lisuride. Ergot-derived DAs are generally rarely used these days due to their established risk of valvular and lung fibrosis. Thus, patients receiving ergoline-derived DA should be monitored with echocardiography before treatment is started and regularly during treatment. On the other hand, the newer agents or the non-ergoline agonists bind only to D2 and D3 receptors, so they are preferred as the cleaner drugs, while they preserve a modest pharmacodynamic interaction with other receptors. So the drugs that are commonly used are pramipexole, ropinirole, apomorphine, and rotigotine. Next. So all drugs under the ergoline class are used in early and advanced PD, the initial treatment of Parkinsonism, and as an adjunct therapy in patients taking L-DOPA. The physician should perform first regular echocardiographic monitoring and or pulmonary function tests because of the risk of retroperitoneal pulmonary or cardiac or valvular fibrosis. Next. The first one under ergoline would be the bromocriptine. This is a strong agonist of D2 class of dopamine receptors. used in adjunct therapy with L-DOPA and as a monotherapy to delay the institution of L-DOPA and minimize fluctuation of motor symptoms. So the recommended maximum daily dose should not exceed 30 milligrams. So sa internet, yung oral dosage niya is 2.5 to 40 while sa book 7.5 to 30. Basta it should not exceed 30 milligrams. So the side effects that are commonly associated with bromocriptine are orthostatic hypotension, headache, nausea, and vomiting. Increased dopaminergic transmission via this drug is also associated with psychiatric side effects such as confusion, hallucinations, and delusions. So impulse control disorders have also been associated with the administration of these drugs. This should not be combined with serotonin because it may cause serotonin syndrome by increasing the serotonin level. So too much serotonin causes signs and symptoms that can range from mild, for example, shivering and diarrhea, to severe, which includes muscle rigidity, fever, seizures, and it can lead to death if it is not treated. Next, please. Supergolide acts as an agonist of the D2 and the D1 dopamine and the 5-HT1 and the 5-HT2 families of serotonin receptors. It has been used as an efficacious and well-tolerated monotherapy for the early Parkinson's disease. The recommended maximum daily dose should not exceed 3 milligrams. So this drug is associated with an increase in pulmonary artery pressure. Due to this was removed from the US market in 2007, but it is still used internationally. The side effects include increased sedation, somnolence, and daytime sleepiness. Next. The third one will be the cabergoline, which is an orally available long-acting because it has a half-life of 80 hours. It is a D2 dopamine receptor agonist. So due to its long half-life, it is administered in a once-a-day fashion, and it significantly delays the onset of motor complications. So according to some studies, the likelihood of developing moderate to severe valvular regurgitation was increased from 5-fold to 7-fold in patients that were treated with cabergoline in comparison to placebo or non-ergot TA. So most of these effects were shown to be dose-dependent. The other side effects that might be associated with cabergoline treatment includes nausea, dyspepsia, vomiting, dizziness, postural hypotension, peripheral edema, and increased periods of daytime sleepiness. Next, please. So the fourth one would be the lisuride, which is an effective adjunct to L-DOPA in the early PD treatment. So the use of this drug and L-DOPA combined decreases the incidence of dyskinetic and abnormal motor symptoms in the early as well as in the advanced stages of PD. So this drug is a potent T2 dopamine receptor agonist, but it also acts on the 5-HT1A and 5-HT2A or C serotonin receptors. So this molecule has a similar pharmacodynamic profile to LSD, but it lacks psychedelic features. So it is proposed that agonistic actions on the 5-HT2B receptors mediate the pathologic processes within the valves of the heart. So since pharmacodynamic studies show that lisuride is devoid of this activity, it could be that its use might not induce fibrotic valvulopathy, which is a distinction among the ergot-derived DA since majority is associated with valvular heart diseases. So the most common side effects were dry mouth, nausea, weakness, postural hypotension, and headache. Next, please. So on the other hand, the non-ergoline class are used in the early PD, patients with PD and motor fluctuation, and can be combined with L-DOPA in the late stages. So next po. The first one under non-ergoline would be the pramipexole, which exerts a potent agonistic effects on the D2 family of dopamine receptors with preferential affinity towards the D3 receptors. So it produces beneficial effects in the early stages of PD, which significantly reduce dyskinesia, and it is a valuable option for treating depression associated with bipolar disease, which makes it a good option for those patients who develop psychiatric symptoms of depression while suffering from PD. So the starting dose is 0.25 milligrams administered 3 times a day, which is doubled after a week, and then again after another week. Most patients require 0.5 to 1.5 milligram 3 times daily. So the documented side effects of these drugs would be sleep attacks and somnolence and nausea. Next po. The second one would be the mopirinol, which has a high agonist affinity for the dopamine D2 receptors. So it is effective as a monotherapy and can be used with levodopa to smooth out response fluctuations. So the standard form is given 3 times daily, but a prolonged release form can be taken once daily. So this drug is metabolized by the hepatic CYP1A2, and other drugs metabolized by this isoform, which includes caffeine and warfarin, may reduce its clearance. So adverse effects and contraindications are similar to those of pramipexole. So the starting dose would be 0.25 milligrams, which is given 3 times daily, and it is increased by 0.75 milligram at weekly intervals until the 4th week. After that, increment is by 0.5 milligram, but mostly patients require 2 to 8 milligrams of the drug 3 times a day. Next, please. The third one would be the rotigotine, which is a distinct DA in the sense that it is administered by a transdermal patch. So it is a good choice for non-compliant patient that has problems in daily dosing or drug adherence, since drug delivery through the skin means avoidance of gastrointestinal incompatibility and hepatic first pass metabolism without the unpleasant and painful experiences with injection or rectal applications. So its common side effects include orthostatic hypotension, nausea, vomiting, and sleep somnolence. Next, please. The fourth one would be the apomorphine, which is a strong non-ergoline D1 and D2 class receptor agonist that is most commonly used for the off dyskinetic episodes that occur due to the L-DOPA treatment. So off time is when levodopa is no longer working well, and symptoms such as tremor, rigidity, and slow movement re-emerge. So this drug is injected subcutaneously and may provide rapid but temporary relief of off periods of akinesia in patients on optimized dopaminergic therapy. But because of severe nausea, retreatment for 3 days with antiemetic drugs is necessary. Side effects would include dyskinesias, hypotension, drowsiness, and sweating. Next, please. So the fifth one would be the piripidyl, which is a piperazine-derived drug that produces an agonistic effect on the D2 and D3 dopamine receptors and antagonistic effect on the alpha-2 receptors. So it is given orally with a dose range of 150 to 250 milligrams per day. So it is effective and safe in the early PD therapy, and it is also implicated in pathologic gambling and impulse control disorders, as well as sudden onset of sleep attack. So in terms of circulatory effects, this drug can produce vasodilation due to the alpha-2 adrenolytic activity, sympathetic increase of heart rate, plasma renin, and aldosterone level. Due to all of these side effects, such as orthostatic hypotension on and or syncope are noted. Next po. So this would be the summary of the dopamine agonist. Next, please.
Actually,
Yes.
I commend that report wherein you tabulated everything. It would be easier for you to know what are more predominant D2, what are predominant D1. Okay, so I guess if you will make a report, it's better to make it in a tabular form so that it would not be too much text, but at least you will know the pertinent information about the drug. Okay, so very good for that report. You can continue.
So let's proceed to the monoamine oxidase inhibitors. Next, please. So there are two classes, or there are two isoenzyme form of the MAO, termed as the MAO-A and the MAO-B, which are present in both the peripheral adrenergic structure and intestinal mucosa. But MAO-B predominates in the brain. So it is responsible for most of the oxidative metabolism of dopamine. So this MAO-B breaks down dopamine, inhibiting it will prolong the action of dopamine in the brain, thus improving the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Next, please. So this would be the forms of the MAO-B inhibitors. So the first one would be the selegiline. So the common brand name would be the one on number one, the L-Depril, or the L-Deprenyl, while the generic name would be the selegiline hydrochloride. So this selegiline is used as a monotherapy or as an adjunct therapy for motor fluctuation. So aside from being a MAO inhibitor in relation to treating Parkinson's disease, other proposed mechanism would be its neuroprotective effects that prevents the progression of Parkinson's disease through the increase in the production of neurotrophins that protect neurons from the inflammatory process. So side effects include nausea, constipation, but this may worsen insomnia. So yung side effects ng nila parehas lang din. Next, please. So the third one would be the nasagiline. So the available doses are 0.5 and 1 milligram, but the standard dosage is 1 milligram per deciliter. It is used as a monotherapy for slowness, stiffness, and tremor, and an adjunct therapy for motor fluctuation. Whereas the safinamide, which is available in 200 milligrams, is used as an adjunctive therapy for carbidopa or levodopa for off-year episode. The starting dose of this drug would be 50 milligram, given orally once daily, but it is increased after 2 weeks to 100 milligram once daily. Next, please. So this would be the summary of the MAO inhibitors, MAO-B. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So, how many, sige, meron pa. Sige, you can continue first and then I will ask questions.
So I will be reporting about COMT, apomorphine, and amantadine. Next slide, please. Catechol O methyltransferase inhibitors are a class of medications that are used alongside carbidopa-levodopa therapy in the treatment of symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Inhibition of dopa carboxylase is associated with compensatory activation of other pathways of levodopa metabolism, especially COMT. Selective COMT inhibitors such as tolcapone and entacapone prolong the action of levodopa by diminishing its peripheral metabolism. These medications helps with the wearing off of the effects of levodopa. Between the two, entacapone is preferred because it has not been associated with hepatotoxicity, unlike tolcapone, where there are instances of liver function abnormalities. Entacapone and tolcapone has the same pharmacologic effects wherein both are rapidly absorbed, bound to plasma proteins, and metabolized before excretions. For tolcapone, it has both peripheral and central effects. It is taken in standard dosage of 100 milligrams thrice a day. And for entacapone, only has peripheral effects. It has 200 milligrams per dosage, and it needs to be taken with each dose of levodopa up to 6 times daily. Adverse effects of the COMT inhibitors relate in part to increased levodopa exposure and include dyskinesias, nausea, and confusion. Next slide, please. It is often necessary, sorry, Stalevo consists of combination of levodopa with both carbidopa and entacapone. The combination agent may provide greater symptomatic benefit from carbidopa. This preparation simplifies the drug regimen and requires the consumption of fewer tablets than otherwise. Despite the convenience of a single combination preparation, use of Stalevo rather than carbidopa-levodopa has been associated with earlier occurrence and increased frequency of dyskinesia. Next slide, please. Apomorphine is the oldest dopaminergic drug. It is a short-acting D1 and D2-like receptor agonist. It is the only drug proven to have an efficacy equal to that of levodopa, although with the shorter time to onset and effect duration. Although oral levodopa is still the gold standard of symptomatic therapy, matched only by apomorphine in its effect size on motor symptoms. The response of levodopa is maintained in the long run, but as the disease progresses, there are more fluctuations such as dyskinesias. The current role of apomorphine is the management of levodopa-related motor complications. The clinical benefits begins within 10 minutes of injection by administering, and it will last for 2 hours. Clinical trials have shown that intermittent apomorphine injections provide rapid and effective relief from unpredictable off periods. Next slide, please. Nausea is often troublesome, especially at the initiation of apomorphine treatment. Adverse effects include dyskinesias, drowsiness, insomnia, chest pain, swelling, hypotension, syncope, constipation, and diarrhea. Next slide, please. For amantadine, amantadine was found to have relative weak anti-Parkinsonism properties. Clinical trials have shown that amantadine decreases symptoms of bradykinesia, rigidity, and tremor. A study also shows that it acts on the dopamine neurons. It is a weak non-competitive antagonist of NMDA receptor, which increases dopamine release and prevents dopamine reuptake. Next slide, please. The pharmacokinetics. Peak plasma concentration of amantadine are reached 1 to 4 hours after an oral dose. The plasma half-life is between 2 and 4 hours, with most of the drug being excreted unchanged in the urine. Although levodopa, I'm sorry, less efficacious than levodopa and its benefits may be short-lived. It may favorably influence the bradykinesia, rigidity, and tremor of Parkinsonism. Although levodopa is a less common side effect, amantadine is one of the best known drugs to cause it. Side effect is reversible with the withdrawal of medication. The standard dosage of it is 100 milligrams orally taken 2 to 3 times daily. Next slide, please. Next slide. Adverse effects. Amantadine has a number of undesirable CNS effects, all of which can be reversed by stopping the drug. These effects would be restlessness, depression, irritability, insomnia, agitation, hallucinations, and confusion. Overdosage may produce an acute toxic psychosis. Livedo reticularis sometimes occur in patients taking amantadine. As I've said earlier, um, it is less common, but it is the most. But amantadine is one of the best known drugs to cause it. Other adverse reactions to amantadine include headache, heart failure, postural hypotension, urinary retention, and gastrointestinal disturbances. It should be used with caution in patients with a history of seizures or heart failure. Next slide.
Okay, before you proceed with this, you know that amantadine also has other indications. So what do you what is that other indication that is basically being used in the clinics? For what disease entity are you going to give your amantadine? And this is a very common drug that you give. Besides giving it for Parkinson's disease, you know that it has this other feature or mechanism of action.
Wait.
What specific disease entity? It is your
Wait po.
kaya mo yan.
Wait lang.
Oh, wala niyo, hindi niyo ni-research. Ano? Sige
Hindi,
na.
nabasa ko po yung kaso nakalimutan ko.
Sige. It is you're correct. It's the influenza, but be specific. It's for your influenza A. Because the other drug for your influenza would be what? You need to be specific kasi with amantadine because that's only for A. But if you will take into consideration both influenza A and B, what is that other drug? This is just a nice to know. Anyone? Saan kaya? Ano kaya yung drug na yon that can target both influenza A and B? Your amantadine is just for A. It is your? Sige nga. Anyone? It is your oseltamivir, correct. So for the previous reporter, besides you have reported about your bromocriptine, I guess we have already discussed this. But for your review, you know that your bromocriptine is also given for endocrinologic problem. Specifically, what problem is that? So bromocriptine acts or focused on your Parkinson's disease, but what other endocrinologic problem? Yes, you are correct. It's because of an increased prolactin levels in the blood. Okay? Sige, you continue muna. When you are reporting for your medications, it is important that you don't fail to read up on other indications. Okay, yes, we are discussing about Parkinson's disease. But remember, during exams, it is not only focused on the Parkinson's disease per se. Okay? If you have read about that drug, you should have read also its other indications. So it's better that if you have drugs with other indications, include it in your table so that you will remember them. Okay? Sige, you can continue.
Hello, good afternoon. We now proceed to acetylcholine blocking drugs. Next slide, please. So, anticholinergic and antimuscarinic drugs are agents that may improve the tremor and rigidity of Parkinsonism, but have little effect on bradykinesia. In this table, these are some drugs with antimuscarinic properties that are commonly used in Parkinsonism. We have benzotropine mesylate, bipyridine, or phenadrine, proxyclidine, and trihexyphenidyl. Most of these drugs were developed before levodopa became available. Next, please. So their use is accompanied by different adverse effects in peripheral nervous system. Anorexia, nausea, and vomiting occur because of the stimulation of chemoreceptor. The tachycardia and ventricular extrasystole is the result from dopaminergic action on the heart. Hypotension may also develop, and mydriasis, which is caused by the adrenergic action on the iris. It also affects the saliva and urine. They turn into brownish color because of the pigment produced from catecholamine oxidation. For the CNS, visual and auditory hallucination may happen. Also dyskinesias, but only in rare cases. Mood changes may arise, including depression, psychosis, and anxiety. Next, please. Next. So the adverse effects of antimuscarinic drugs are poorly tolerated by the elderly or cognitively impaired patients. Acute suppurative parotitis may arise sometimes because of complication of dryness of the mouth. So if the medication is to be withdrawn, it should be gradual to prevent acute exacerbation of Parkinsonism. Next, please. The surgical procedures. Next. In surgical procedures, the most common surgical treatment for Parkinson disease is the deep brain stimulation. It has lower morbidity and it is reserved for bradykinesia, rigidity, and tremor. Uh, and for patients who suffers medication-induced dyskinesias. And second, the stimulation of subthalamic nucleus or globus pallidus by an implanted electrode and stimulator. This has yielded a good result in management of clinical fluctuations of or dyskinesias. Next, please. For the trials and studies, in a controlled trial of transplantation of dopaminergic tissue, symptomatic benefit occurred in a patient who is less than 60 years old. And in another trial, benefits were significant or consequal. Uncontrollable dyskinesias occurred in some patients in both studies. It could be from the relative excess of dopamine from the continued fiber outgrowth of the transplant. Next, please. So the neuroprotective therapy next. So this anti-apoptotic agent, glutamate antagonist, intraparenchymally administered glial-derived neurotropic factor, and anti-inflammatory drugs. These are compounds that have been looked into as potential neuroprotective agents, which slows down the disease progression. Next. So the gene therapy, several phase 1 or phase 2 trials of gene therapy for Parkinson disease have been completed in the USA. The adeno-associated virus type 2 are identified as the vector for the genes. The genes were for glutamic acid decarboxylase, which is infused into subthalamic nucleus. It um, it facilitates synthesis of GABA, while the aromatic acid decarboxylase and nurturin, they are both infused into putamen. The aromatic acid decarboxylase increases metabolism of levodopa to dopamine, and the nurturin enhances the survival of dopaminergic neurons. Next. So we now move on to the general comments on drug management of patient with Parkinsonism. Next. So the benefit of levodopa therapy often diminish as disease advances, and serious adverse effects may complicate long-term treatment. When symptomatic treatment becomes necessary, a trial of rasagiline, selegiline, and amandine can be used. The third one is in older patients, carbidopa-levodopa therapy is the most effective symptomatic treatment for the motor disturbances. And lastly, the Ritari and COMT inhibitor, they are helpful in Parkinsonism and long-term complication of levodopa therapy, plus the rasagiline, which delays the disease progression. Next, please.
So remember that slide? That is a very important slide, okay? Because it gives you some information about how will you treat your Parkinson's disease. Okay, you continue with the drug-induced.
Okay, so next. For the drug-induced Parkinsonism, reserpine depletes the biogenic monoamines from their storage sites, whereas the haloperidol, metoclopramide, and phenothiazines, it blocks the dopamine receptors and may produce Parkinsonian syndrome, usually after 3 months. So if the treatment is necessary, antimuscarinic drugs are preferred. Also note that the levodopa is not useful if neuroleptic drugs are continued and may even aggravate the mental disorder. So next please. The atypical Parkinsonism disease, syndrome. Next. So these are the 4 conditions of atypical Parkinsonism that are associated with abnormal protein buildup. First, we have the dementia with Lewy bodies. There is abnormal accumulation of alpha-synuclein protein in the brain cells. Next is the progressive supranuclear palsy, which the protein buildup affects the frontal lobe, the brainstem, cerebellum, and substantia nigra. And then for the multiple system atrophy, it affects the autonomic nervous system, including substantia nigra and at times the cerebellum. And lastly, the corticobasal syndrome. This is very rare and typically affects one side of the body more than the other. And it also makes it difficult for the patients to see.
Hello, narinig po.
Yes, yes, you continue.
So we will be talking about the other movement disorders. Next slide, please. First is tremor. Tremor consists of rhythmic oscillatory movements, and physiological postural tremor is a normal phenomenon that is enhanced in amplitude by anxiety, fatigue, thyrotoxicosis, and intravenous epinephrine or isoproterenol. Next slide, please. Propanolol, this reduces its amplitude, and if administered intraarterially, this prevents the response of isoproterenol in the perfused limb, presumably through some peripheral action. And certain drugs, especially the bronchodilators, valproate, tricyclic antidepressants, and lithium, may produce a dose-dependent exaggeration of the normal physiologic tremor that is reversed by discontinuing the drug. Next slide, please. Tremors are produced by sympathomimetics. Terbutaline, a bronchodilator, is blocked by propanolol. It antagonizes both beta-1 and beta-2 receptors and is not blocked by metoprolol, a beta-1 selective antagonist. This suggests that tremor is mediated mainly by the beta-2 receptors. Next slide, please. Next is the essential tremor, which is also a postural tremor, sometimes familial with autosomal dominant inheritance, and clinically similar to physiologic tremor. Dysfunction of beta-1 receptors is implicated in some instances, since the tremor may resound dramatically to standard doses of metoprolol as well as to propanolol. Next slide. Essential tremors may involve the hands, head, voice, and much less commonly the legs. Patients may become functionally limited or socially withdrawn. Quality of life is affected, and some patients report being seriously disabled by the tremor. Next slide, please. So the most useful therapeutic approach is with propanolol. A total daily dose of 120 milligrams or more, and it also ranges from 60 to 320 milligrams and is divided into 2 doses. There are few adverse effects, and it is used with caution in patients with heart failure, heart block, asthma, depression, or hypoglycemia. Other adverse effects include fatigue, malaise, lightheadedness, and impotence. Next slide. Primidone is an anti-epileptic drug, gradually increasing doses of up to 250 milligrams 3 times daily. And patients with tremor are very sensitive to primidone. It should be started on a 50 milligram once daily, and the daily dose increased by 50 milligrams every 2 weeks, depending on the response. In many instances, a dose of 125 milligrams 2 or 3 times daily is sufficient. Next slide. Topiramate is an anti-epileptic drug, which may also be helpful in a dose of 400 milligrams daily, built up gradually. Alprazolam in doses of up to 3 milligrams daily, or gabapentin 100 to 2,400 milligrams per day, typically 1,200 milligrams per day, is also helpful in some patients. In gabapentin, this binds to the alpha-2 gamma subunit, a delta subunit of calcium channels. It produces less consistent relief of tremor, but is associated with fewer side effects than primidone. Next slide. This is a table of the propranolol, primidone, and topiramate. Next slide. So, intention tremor. This is present during movement, but not at rest. It occurs as a toxic manifestation of alcohol or drugs such as phenytoin. Withdrawal or reduction in dosage provides dramatic relief. Next slide. Rest tremor, usually due to Parkinsonism, occurs when the muscle is relaxed, such as when the hands are resting on the lap. With this disorder, a person's hands, arms, or legs may shake even when they are at rest. Often, the tremor only affects the hands or fingers. Next slide. Next would be Huntington's disease.
Before you proceed, can you explain why is it that it is contraindicated to use propranolol in patients with diabetes mellitus? Why do you think it is contraindicated to use in DM patients?
Beta blockers can prolong, enhance, or alter the symptoms of hypoglycemia.
Basically, it will mask. So basically, it will mask all of the symptoms because the shakiness, di ba, part yun ng symptoms of your movement disorders or your tremor. So if you will have, or if you gave that medication, then that manifestation will not be evident. So you will miss the diagnosis if you give that. Okay? Sige. How about for asthma? Why do you think it is contraindicated to use beta blockers in asthmatic patients?
Propranolol could precipitate severe bronchospasms.
Correct. Because remember, your beta agonist will be the one to cause your bronchodilation. So if you give your inhibition, then you might go into exacerbation. Sige, you continue.
So next is Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is an autosomal dominant inherited disorder caused by an abnormality of the Huntington gene on chromosome 4. It is characterized by progressive chorea and dementia. Chorea, it is related to an imbalance of dopamine, acetylcholine, GABA, and perhaps other neurotransmitters in the basal ganglia. Next slide. Huntington's disease is characterized by prominent neuronal loss in the striatum of the brain. Atrophy of these structures proceeds in an orderly fashion, affecting the tail of the caudate nucleus, proceeding anteriorly from the mediodorsal to ventrolateral. Interneurons and afferent terminals are largely spared. Striatal projection neurons, the medium spiny neurons, are severely affected. This leads to large decreases in striatal GABA concentrations, whereas somatostatin and dopamine concentrations are relatively preserved. Next slide. This is the sequence of neurons involved in Huntington's chorea or Huntington's disease. On the top is the normal pathway, in which dopaminergic neurons from substantia nigra normally inhibit the output of spiny GABAergic neurons from striatum, whereas the cholinergic neurons, the acetylcholine, exert an excitatory effect. And in the Huntington's disease, some cholinergic neurons may be lost, but even more GABAergic neurons degenerate. Next, please. In here is the basal ganglia in Huntington's disease. Neurons that project from striatum to the globus pallidus externa and form the indirect pathway are affected earlier in the true course of the disease than those that project to the globus pallidus interna. This leads to an inhibition of the globus pallidus externa. And the increased activity in this structure in turn inhibits the subthalamic nucleus, substantia nigra pars reticulata, and globus pallidus interna, resulting in a loss of inhibition to the ventroanterior and ventrolateral thalamus and increased thalamocortical excitatory drive. Next slide. Tetrabenzene, 12.5 to 50 milligrams orally, 3 times daily, depletes cerebral dopamine and reduces the severity of chorea. Metabolized by cytochrome P450, and genotyping has therefore been recommended to determine metabolizer status in patients needing doses exceeding 50 milligrams per day. For poor metabolizers, the maximum recommended dose is 50 milligrams daily. Otherwise, a maximum of 100 milligrams daily can be used. Next slide. Next is deutetrabenazine. It is a selective inhibitor of the vesicular monoamine 2 transporter, which modulates the dopamine stores. Dose is built up weekly from 6 milligrams daily to a maximum of 24 milligrams twice daily with food. Contraindicated in patients on monoamine oxidase inhibitors, reserpine, or tetrabenazine, and in those who are severely depressed or suicidal. Next slide. Haloperidol, it started in a small dose. Example is 1 milligram twice daily, and increased every 4 days depending on the response. Flufenazine in a similar dose of 1 milligram twice daily sometimes helps. And olanzapine may also be useful, and dose varies with patient, but 10 milligram daily is often sufficient. Next slide. Other important aspects of management includes genetic counseling, speech therapy, physical and occupational therapy, dysphagia precautions, and provisions of social services. And this is the summary of the drugs used in Huntington's disease. Next. Thank you.
Okay, before you proceed, you know that there is really no cure for your Huntington's disease, and everything that you gave for Huntington's would be just to address the symptoms. So what do you think is the prognosis of patients diagnosed with Huntington's disease? Because you need that when you educate your patient. Because it's just symptomatic therapy that you give. So how will you tell your patient the prognosis of your Huntington's?
The prognosis is that people with Huntington's usually die within 10 to 30 years following the onset of the symptoms.
So basically, the prognosis is bad. So it's very dismal. So I guess at the early course of the disease, you need to advise your patients that you will just address, you will just give symptomatic relief and not really cure for the disease, because they might expect something when you start giving medications. Okay, and of course, if I remember right, these patients will eventually have complications rather than the Huntington's really causing the death. Okay, so they can have respiratory infections. Okay, so they can also have trauma. So that you need to advise them so that you can complete your patient education, so that they will be also enlightened with regards to the disease. Sige, you continue with the report. You can continue.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, yeah, you can
Yeah.
continue.
Okay, okay. Next slide. Chorea. Chorea is a irregular, arithmetic, and predictable jerky movement which involves the extremity and the face in continuous random sequence. Next. Classification of chorea. Hereditary Huntington disease and Wilson disease. Secondary is a syndrome, chorea, infection, encephalitis, systemic lupus, and erythematous. Drug induced chorea, antipsychotic, estrogen, and levodopa. Metabolic and endocrine. Hyperthyroidism, hyperglycemic, non-ketonic encephalopathy, and senile chorea. Senile chorea is applied to cause of a sporadic chorea with onset after the age of 50, around 50 years. The cause of senile chorea are numerous and include drugs, medication, cerebrovascular disease, genetic and sporadic neurogeneration, and range of systemic disorder. Next, treatment of chorea. Haloperidol 3 to 6 mg daily, sulfarid and sonopex. Next, please. Bellism, sudden onset of violent involuntary flinging movement of the limbs, usually affect on one side of the body. Hemibellism, the appearance is similar to baseball pitcher windup, caused by a lesion of the subthalamic nucleus, usually as a result of stroke. Treatment, neuroleptic drug. Next. Dystonia, a sustained muscle contraction frequently causing twisting and repetitive movement of abnormal posture. Next. Dystonia, focal dystonia affect on one region of the body. Segment two adjustment region. Multifocal dystonia is a two or more non-adjustment region. Hemidystonia and generalized. Next. Focal dystonia. Blepharospasm. Blepharospasm is a rare condition that causes your eyelid to blink or twitch. This called involuntary blinking or twitching. The twitching is caused by a muscle spasm around your eye, and blepharospasm is just one of severe reasons your eye might twitch. Oromandibular dystonia. Oromandibular dystonia is a focal dystonia characterized by forceful contraction of the face, jaw, and tongue, causing difficulty in opening and closing the mouth and often affecting chewing and speech. Cervical dystonia. Torticollis head rotation, laterocollis head tilt to one side, anterocollis and posteriorcollis flexion or extension of the neck. Graphoplasm is a muscular spasm of the thumb and a forefinger while writing with a pen or pencil, writer's cramp. Spastic dystonia. Spastic dystonia is a disease caused by involuntary movement of one or more muscles of the voice box larynx. Toe or foot dystonia. is a painful cramp foot are tilted signs of dystonia. Next. Next, please. Treatment uh, treatment of dystonia. There is no satisfactory medical treatment. Occasionally, they respond to carbamazepine, myorelaxant, baclofen, and tizidine. Anticholinergic drug, botulotoxin, Botox, and Dysport. All of these approaches are worthwhile, not successful. Thank you.
Good day, doc, and everyone. I'm going to present on tics, the sudden twitches, movement, or sound that people do repeatedly. Next slide. Chronic multiple tics. It is a disorder. In this condition, the condition involves brief, uncontrollable spasm-like movement or vocal outburst, but not both. If both a physical tic and vocal outburst are present, then the condition is called Tourette syndrome. Next slide. Involuntary and semi-voluntary contraction of functionally related groups of muscles result in sudden, brief, intermittent, non-rhythmic, and repetitive. Next. The treatment with the antipsychotic drugs are the most effective drugs, with drugs that block dopamine receptor or deplete dopamine stores. Haloperidol, pimozide, clonidine, guanfacine. Next, please. Haloperidol is a common pharmacologic approach. The start dose is 0.25 or 0.5 mg daily, and the gradual dose when increases by 0.25 mg every 4 or 5 days. Total daily maintenance dose is 3 to 8 mg. Adverse effect of haloperidol is extrapyramidal movement disorder, sedation, dryness of the mouth, blurred vision, and gastrointestinal disturbance. Next. The treatment with phenothiazine, the atypical antipsychotics, the risperidone, and aripiprazole, patient with significant behavior problems, clonazepam and carbamazepines. Injection of botulinum toxin A at the site of problematic tics. Treatment of associated attention deficit disorder, clonidine patch, guanfacine, and pimoline. Obsessive compulsive disorder, you can use clomipramine. Next. Drug-induced dyskinesia. It is an involuntary movement disorder in which we can see the symptoms like repetitive and irregular motions of the mouth, face, limbs. Levodopa or dopamine agonist produce diverse dyskinesias as a dose-related phenomenon in patients with Parkinson's disease. Dose reduction can reverse dyskinesias. Chorea may also develop in a patient receiving phenytoin, carbamazepines, amphetamines, lithium, and oral contraceptives. Next. Dystonia may occur from the administration of dopaminergic agent, lithium, carbamazepine, metoclopramide. Postural tremor. Postural tremor occurs when a body part is held against the gravity. Example, when the arms are extended, such as when holding a tray. The theophylline, caffeine, lithium, valproic acid, thyroid hormone, tricyclic antidepressant, and isoproterenol. Next. Tardive dyskinesia, characterized by a variety of abnormal movement, involuntary, sudden, jerky, or slow twisting movement of the face or body. It is a complication of long-term use of antipsychotic medication. Tardive dystonia and neuroleptic malignant syndrome. It is a life-threatening reaction that can occur in response to neuroleptic or antipsychotic medication. The symptoms will include high fever, confusion, rigid muscle, variable blood pressure, sweating, fast heart rate. Next. Rabbit syndrome. It is a rare form of extrapyramidal adverse effect of antipsychotic medicines in which perioral tremors occurs at the rate of 4 to 5 Hz. It is manifested by rhythmic vertical movements about the mouth. It may respond to anticholinergic drugs, and this syndrome is characterized by involuntary rhythmic motion of the mouth, but without the involvement of the tongue. Thank you.
Wilson's disease. Next slide. Wilson's disease is an autosomal recessive disease caused by mutation of ATP-NB gene, resulting in abnormal copper metabolism, resulting in deposition of copper salts in liver, brain, kidney, and cornea. Wilson's disease is also called as hepatolenticular degeneration disease. The major clinical features of Wilson's disease include liver disease, neurological disease, KF rings, and osteoporosis. Hepatic and neurologic damage may be severe or fatal. Treatment. Treatment involves using chelating agents like penicillamine or dimethylcysteine, trietine, and tetrathiomolbide has been used. Toxic effect of penicillamine includes gastrointestinal distress, myasthenia, optic neuropathy, and blood dyscrasis. Restless leg syndrome. Restless leg syndrome or Wills-Eggbom disease is a common chronic multifactorial movement disorder of limbs in which the patient has irresistible urge to move legs. This is often associated with abnormal, non-painful sensation that start at rest and is improved by activity. There is diurnal pattern of worsening symptoms at night. There is sleep disturbance as well as associated involuntary jerking movement of legs during sleep known as periodic leg movement of sleep. Restless leg syndrome is underdiagnosed and there is a significant delay in diagnosis. The disorder may start in childhood, but diagnosis is often made until the third decade of life. There are two types of restless leg syndrome: primary restless leg syndrome and secondary restless leg syndrome. Secondary restless leg syndrome can occur secondary to some disorders including iron deficiency, end-stage renal disease, diabetes mellitus, rheumatic disease, venous insufficiency, peripheral neuropathy, and other reasons. Restless leg syndrome mostly affects close to one-third of pregnant, uremic, and diabetic patients. Treatment: dopaminergic therapy and both palmiperoxol and ropinirole are approved for this condition. Opioid analgesics, benzodiazepines, and certain anticonvulsants like G-Baptin are also used. Thank
Okay, so when you talk about the restless leg syndrome, this is a very important diagnosis because you need to educate your patients well with this. Because if you have been reading, what have you read about restless leg syndrome? Which has higher predilection? Is it the men or the female sex? What do you think? Have you read some articles about restless leg syndrome? Which do you think has more risk? It is more common in males or females? Are you still here? The one who reported?
In men, sir.
It is?
In men.
No, it is in women. It is more common in women, but risk of complications should be higher for men. Okay? That is if you have time, you can brush through the journals. There are different journals now discussing about restless leg syndrome. Okay? So they have, I think males have increased risk of mortality compared to women, but incidence-wise, it's more commonly seen in women rather than in men. Okay? Anyone? Any question? Any question for the reporters? So, if you don't have, do we have another topic? May topic pa ba tayo? You can proceed.
Can you hear me po? Hello? Hello?
Yes, you're heard.
Thank you. So, let's go with the antipsychotic agents and lithium. So this is the outline of our discussion. I will be reporting about the introduction, and there will be hypothesis, the serotonin and dopamine hypothesis of schizophrenia, the glutamate hypothesis. We have also the basic pharmacology, the chemical types, pharmacokinetic, and pharmacodynamics. We have also the clinical pharmacology, its indication, drug choice, dosage, parenteral preparation, dosage schedule, maintenance treatment, drug combination, and adverse reactions. We have also the drug interactions, overdose, psychosocial treatment, and cognitive remediation, benefit and limitations, drug treatment. And we have also the lithium, mood stabilizing drugs, and other treatments for bipolar disorders. Okay, first let's go with this case study. So there's this 19-year-old male student which is brought into the clinic by by his mother, who has been concerned about her son's erratic behavior and strange beliefs. Oh, my apologies. I wasn't able to disable its sorry. And he destroyed the TV because he felt the TV was sending harassing messages to him. In addition, oh my god. Wait.
I think you need to disable first the slide.
Oh my gosh. Wait.
It's okay.
My apologies po, Dr. Perez.
Sige lang, go lang. Wala pa naman akong tanong.
Okay po. Isang ano na lang. I will just use the other slides, but there will be no case study there, but I'll just read na lang, I guess, because I think this nakaset na po kasi yung nito eh, yung
John, basahin mo na lang ng ganyan.
Pwede, okay.
Yeah, and then you just do the slideshow afterwards.
But ano po, the slideshow is ano po, until 1 to 18, ganun po siya.
It's okay. Sige lang, go lang.
Okay po, thank you.